Good morning. Today's Old Testament lesson is from 1 Kings chapter 8, verses 1, 6, 10 through 11, 22 through 30, and 41 through 43. These verses report what happened immediately upon the completion of the temple in Jerusalem. Solomon has finished that project with the help of many people and workers. And if you want to read more details about that, go to 1 Kings chapter 7, which is all about the construction and completion of the temple. This is what happened next. Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes, the leaders of the ancestral houses of the Israelites, before King Solomon in Jerusalem, to bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of the city of David, which is Zion. Then the priests brought the ark of the covenant of the Lord to its place in the inner sanctuary of the house, in the most holy place, underneath the wings of the cherubim. And when the priests came out of the holy place, a cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priests could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord. Then Solomon stood before the altar of the Lord in the presence of all the assembly of Israel, and spread out his hands to heaven. He said, O Lord, God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven above or on earth beneath, keeping covenant and steadfast love for your servants who walk before you with all their heart. The covenant that you kept for your servant, my father David, as you declared to him. You promised with your mouth and have this day fulfilled with your hand. Therefore, O Lord, God of Israel, keep for your servant, my father David, that which you promised him, saying, There shall never fail you a successor before me to sit on the throne of Israel, if only your children look to their way, to walk before me as you have walked before me. Therefore, O God of Israel, let your word be confirmed, which you promised to your servant, my father David. But will God indeed dwell on the earth? Even heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you, much less this house that I have built. Have regard to your servant's prayer and his plea, O Lord my God, heeding the cry and the prayer that your servant prays to you today, that your eyes may be open night and day towards this house, the place of which you said, My name shall be there, that you may heed the prayer that your servant prays toward this place. Hear the plea of your servant and of your people Israel when they pray towards this place. O hear in heaven your dwelling place. Heed and forgive. Likewise, when a foreigner who is not of your people Israel comes from a distant land because of your name, for they shall hear of your great name, your mighty hand, and your outstretched arm. When a foreigner comes and prays toward this house, then hear in heaven your dwelling place, and do according to all that the foreigner calls to you, so that all the peoples of the earth may know your name and fear you, as do your people Israel, and so that they may know that your name has been invoked on this house that I have built. Our New Testament passage comes from John, the 6th chapter, verses 56 through 69. Just prior to this, Jesus has been teaching his disciples and others in the synagogue at Capernaum, and he's been talking about the concepts and the philosophy that we now refer to as the sacrament of communion. This is what is written in John 6. Those who eat my flesh and drink my blood abide in me, and I in them. Just as the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so whoever eats me will live because of me. This is the bread that came down from heaven, not like that which your ancestors ate, and they died. But the one who eats this bread will live forever. He said these things while he was teaching in the synagogue at Capernaum. When many of his disciples heard it, they said, "This teaching is difficult. Who can accept it?" But Jesus, being aware that his disciples were complaining about it, said to them, "Does this offend you? Then what if you were to see the Son of Man ascending to where he was before? It is the Spirit that gives life. The flesh is useless. The words that I have spoken to you are spirit and life. But among you there are some who do not believe." For Jesus knew from the first who were the ones that did not believe, and who was the one that would betray him. And he said, "For this reason I have told you that no one can come to me unless it is granted by the Father." Because of this, many of his disciples turned back and no longer went about with him. So Jesus asked the 12, "Do you also wish to go away?" Simon Peter answered him, "Lord, to whom can we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and know that you are the Holy One of God." This is the scripture, the words of God from the people of God. Thanks be to God.
Would you join with me in prayer? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. The biblical law treats immigrants, refugees, really anybody on the move, with the same strict compassion Scripture reserves for orphans and widows. The sacred text considers immigrants and refugees extremely vulnerable and commands people of faith to receive them with hospitality and care. The alien who resides with you shall be to you as the citizen among you, recorded in Deuteronomy. You shall love the alien as yourself, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. From the priestly laws of Leviticus to the covenant code in Deuteronomy, it's hard to imagine any topic that is mentioned more frequently than treatment of the stranger, the foreigner, the resident alien. Many of the most memorable stories in the Hebrew Bible have people on the move at their center. In the book of Genesis, Sarah and Abraham painstakingly travel across the desert and find the presence of God in every place that they lay their heads. The book of Exodus, the people of Israel held captive in Egypt, displaced to the wilderness for 40 years, finally delivered to the promised land. Ruth and Naomi, driven by famine, crop failure, and drought, away from all that is familiar to them, they are saved by their oath of fidelity to each other. Even the books of Samuel and Kings are largely about the ever-present threat of displacement and the challenge of establishing a permanent home. When Solomon dedicates the temple in Jerusalem, he mentions that this house of worship will be for all God's people, not just the Hebrew people who worship locally, but for any foreigner coming into their land. In Luke's gospel, Jesus is born under a hostile government. Matthew says that his parents had to flee the country. From cover to cover, the biblical narrative is sensitive to the causes of migration, drought and famine, displacement by war, hostile neighbors, corrupt governments. Often when the law mandates hospitality to the stranger, the legal precept is accompanied by a spiritual justification. Remember that you yourself were once strangers in a foreign land. We extend hospitality to others because we have been in their position before. Maybe not in your lifetime, but this is why the biblical imagination cultivates in us a very long memory. We all come from communities that have come to wherever we are from someplace else. Migration, forced migration, is a part of being human. Welcome to others is necessary because this mortal life we share is contingent on circumstances none of us control. The crops fail. The rains don't come. The government falls. Most news-watching Americans have been consumed this week with the politics of decision-making. Right decision or wrong decision. Who should have seen this coming? It comforts us to live in the illusion that we are in charge of our own circumstances and that our actions, or the actions of our leaders, shape events and influence the world. But the biblical narratives of migration tell a very different story. They tell a very different story about how human beings are shaped by events and by circumstances around them. These narratives remind us that none of us, not the smartest, not the strongest, not the most powerful among us, not even the systems and structures that we build together, none of these things are supreme actors. We are all creatures of God's power. We are all subjects of God's creation. We are people of faith. Because we are creatures and our existence is contingent on circumstances that we do not control, then we are dependent on one another. The mutual relationships that we share, the gifts of love, the gestures of hospitality that see us through difficult times are necessary for our survival and our flourishing. We might say that these interdependencies are gifts of God's grace. That's why it's so important for people of faith to remember the biblical mandates of hospitality. When one community is in need, another provides. I have watched the events in Afghanistan this week from the same distance from which I have largely ignored this war. I was 13 years old on September 11th, 2001, and I can still remember my dad dropping me off at school one day. We were listening to news of war in Afghanistan, and my father told me this war would probably define my generation in the same way that Vietnam had defined his. I have sometimes felt ashamed when speaking to military service people in the past 20 years because their lives have been profoundly shaped by the war in ways that mine has not. When I graduated from college in 2009, many of my friends took jobs that brought them to Afghanistan. If not in the armed forces, then as civilians working in the immense development and capacity building operations that our country sponsored there. About Afghanistan, there are so many ways in which I think, with slightly different circumstances, that could have been me. That could have been me serving in the military. That could have been me who knew some translator trying to get on an airplane. That could have been me, born in a different place, whose life turned out very differently. Scripture suggests that this can be a very productive feeling if it inspires in us gratitude, if it inspires in us compassion. That could have been me. We could all be in different circumstances, afflicted by war or famine, forced to move or take on some great migration. Scripture says that everybody is on the move at some point, and if it hasn't happened to you or your family in this generation, then surely it will happen in another. So when we relate to our neighbors, let us remember the mutual dependencies by which we all navigate life at one time or another. Those images and videos of Afghans at the Kabul airport have been so heartbreaking to see. There is an emergency resettlement effort underway. Can you imagine what it must be like to be at that airport this week with nothing but the clothes on your back, not concerned about where the airplane will land, but only that it will take off? This summer I read a novel called The Sympathizer by Viet Thanh Nguyen. The author's family fled Vietnam after the fall of Saigon. And the novel is about the layers of identity that he holds as a refugee, as an Asian person, as an American citizen. His book made me think about the generations of Vietnamese Americans who have been shaped by their resettlement in this country. And now there are perhaps 50 to 70,000 Afghans who worked with the Americans in some capacity, if they can be relocated, restarting their lives in such a strange place. A generation of Afghans coming to our country in the same way that Vietnamese refugees were resettled here. Can you imagine their lives? What they look like today, what they will look like a generation from now. Their lives have already been so defined by political and military forces beyond their control, and now they are undertaking a great biblical migration. Remember the law recorded repeatedly throughout the text. You shall not wrong or oppress a resident alien, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. Neither shall you abuse any widow or orphan. It's not just that loving our neighbors is the right thing to do. Harsh treatment of immigrants would be an affront to God. To turn away the stranger would be to claim that we have power we do not possess. It would be to claim that we are more than human by failing to imagine that we could ever be in their predicament. When we relate to any immigrant or refugee, we remember the law. You were strangers once in the land of Egypt. We see in our neighbors our own humanity. It is a confession of faith. A confession of faith in God to say, that could well be me.